If you're reading this, I want to ask you a question. Would you dare to give up everything in your life in just 30 days? It sounds crazy, right? But that's exactly what I did. I used to live a life that many would consider ideal. A stable job, a fully equipped house, and a packed schedule with appointments, parties, and long-term plans. But what few knew was that behind all the glamour, I felt like I was slowly losing myself. It wasn't about money or fame. I had everything society says a person should have to be happy, but I still felt empty. It was like trying to fill a bottomless pit with new things, new experiences, but nothing ever seemed enough. The biggest question began to gnaw at my mind. Do I really need all this to be happy? I began to explore minimalism, living with less but with more meaning. But instead of just applying it half-heartedly, I decided to do something bolder. I set a challenge for myself. Give up almost everything I own for 30 days to discover the true meaning of life. This journey was not just an experiment, it was an adventure full of surprises. It took me to the dark corners of my soul, forced me to face my greatest fears, and ultimately helped me find what I had lost all along: true freedom and happiness. Are you ready to join me on this journey? Deciding to give up everything was just the first step. When I actually started to put it into practice, everything became much more complicated than I had imagined. Have you ever wondered how you'd live if you only kept the things that were truly necessary? That's what I had to do. I set a rule for myself: only keep 50 items. The rest, clothes, books, decorations, electronics, and even sentimental items, would be sold, given away, or stored away. This list of 50 items became a huge challenge because I had to carefully consider both basic needs and emotional value. The first day of decluttering was an unforgettable experience. I stood in front of my wardrobe, looking at dozens of shirts, jeans, and dresses that I had bought but rarely wore. I picked each item up and asked myself, do I really need this? And most of the answers were no. Each item carried a story. A shirt I bought because I thought it would make me look more confident. A pair of shoes I hadn't worn because I was afraid of ruining them. Looking back, I realized I hadn't just bought things, but I had bought the illusion that those things would make me happy. Not just the items, but reorganizing my life also led to some conflicting conversations with family and friends. Some people thought I was trying to get attention or run away from reality. One friend bluntly said, "You're doing something crazy. No one gives up everything to live better." But I knew this was something I had to do. Sometimes, to find answers in life, you need to be willing to step out of your comfort zone. When everything was cleared out, I sat in a room that was almost empty. No decorations, no TV, no familiar things I used to depend on. Only a few sets of clothes, a simple bed, and myself. That was the moment I realized this challenge wasn't just about giving up material things. It was a journey of confronting myself. The first day of the challenge, I woke up in a nearly empty room. No alarm clock, no noise from the TV, and no familiar chair where I usually sat to drink my coffee. I felt like I had stepped into a completely different world. At first, this feeling wasn't pleasant at all. Without the familiar comforts, I felt pushed into a state of emptiness. Every time I wanted to grab something, I realized it wasn't there. Little daily habits, from picking clothes to looking for a book on the shelf, suddenly became strange. The biggest shock came from not having my phone next to me. I decided to put it in a drawer and only use it when absolutely necessary. This made me realize a painful truth. I had become too dependent on my phone to fill the voids in my mind. The first few days were full of difficulties. I felt like I was detoxing from an old way of life. Thoughts like, "Am I being too extreme?" kept popping up in my mind. However, amid these inconveniences, something strange began to happen. As everything around me became quieter, I started to hear my inner voice more clearly. I realized that, for most of my life, I had been covering up my insecurities by shopping, consuming, and staying busy with things that didn't really matter. One of the most memorable moments of the first week was when I spent an evening just gazing at the night sky. No phone, no work, just me and the stars. I realized that this simplicity brought a peace I had never experienced before. But not everything was easy. Society kept reminding me that I was different. Friends invited me to gatherings, but I declined because I didn't want to fall back into old habits. One friend asked me, "Do you think this way of life will last? Won't you go back to the old ways?" That question made me think a lot, but I knew that this challenge wasn't just about giving up possessions, but about a journey to discover the true meaning of life. Gradually, the emptiness was no longer scary. Instead, it became a space where I could truly listen to myself. I began to understand that happiness didn't come from the things I own, but from how I felt and lived each moment fully. After the first week of difficulty, I began to feel small but meaningful changes. The empty room no longer made me feel lonely or anxious. On the contrary, it became a peaceful space where I could think more clearly. I noticed that my mind was less cluttered. Before, every time I entered the room, I was distracted by piles of stuff. Clothes strewn about, cluttered decorations, and unnecessary things I still kept. Now, with a minimalist space, I felt much lighter. The biggest transformation occurred in how I dealt with time. Without getting caught up in consumer habits, I started to slow down and enjoy each moment. In the mornings, I took time to brew coffee and sat by the window watching the sunlight shine through. Before, I would drink my coffee while scrolling on my phone, but now I focused on every breath, every scent, every warm sip of coffee. I also started to form new habits. Instead of browsing social media, I spent time walking around the neighborhood or reading meaningful books that I had never had time for before. One special moment occurred when I decided to write a handwritten letter to an old friend. It had been a while since we'd contacted each other, and writing by hand instead of texting made me realize the value of sincerity. The interesting thing was, my friend replied with a handwritten letter too. We reconnected in a way that felt special to both of us. However, this journey wasn't all comfortable. It also forced me to confront some painful truths. One day, while sorting through the remaining items, I found a box filled with mementos from the past. Old photos, handwritten letters from loved ones who had passed away, and gifts from relationships that had broken apart. I held the box for a long time. Each item in it reminded me of a story, a memory, and a part of my former self. But I realized that holding on to them didn't make me any happier. On the contrary, they felt like anchors, pulling me back to a past I was trying to move beyond. Letting go was not easy, but I learned that sometimes, to move forward, we must have the courage to let go of things that no longer serve the present. Light began to shine in this journey. I felt lighter, freer, and began to understand more about what truly mattered to me. As the challenge entered the second week, I realized that giving up material things was just the tip of the iceberg. The hardest part was confronting the memories and emotions I had long buried. Among the keepsakes I held on to was a photo of my family from over 10 years ago. Looking at it, I remembered the peaceful days spent with my parents, the innocent smiles of my brother and me. But I also recalled the difficult times when I lost my most beloved family member. I had kept my father's belongings for many years. An old watch, a notebook filled with handwritten notes. These items carried beautiful memories, but they also brought sharp pain when I thought of the loss. I asked myself, was I holding on to them because I feared that without these objects, I would forget my father? That was a tough question to answer, but after many nights of reflection, I decided to keep the notebook. Not because I feared forgetting, but because it was a source of inspiration and a lesson from my father. The watch, on the other hand, I gave to my brother, so he too could keep a piece of the memory. This act helped me realize that attachment doesn't come from objects. Loved ones, memories, and even myself are not bound to material things. Love and connection exist in our minds and hearts. During this time, I also started journaling daily, not to record what I did, but to explore the thoughts and feelings I had been avoiding. One evening, I wrote down the question, what do I truly want from life? And for the first time in years, I was honest with myself. I wanted peace, freedom, and to live according to my values. From here, I realized that the journey of letting go was not just about material possessions, but also about cleansing the soul. Each day, I felt myself growing stronger, ready to face old pains and learn how to heal them. As I entered the third week, I began to feel more clearly the positive changes in my life. Before, I often felt pressured by my busy schedule, societal expectations, and the constant comparison to others. But now, living with less, my mind was freed. I no longer worried about keeping up with others, nor was I caught up in the artificial desires society imposes. I realized that true freedom doesn't come from owning more, but from being content with what I have. One day I decided to volunteer at a community center. There I met people who lived simply yet were filled with joy and generosity. They didn't own much, but they knew how to share. This made me question, had I lived selfishly, focusing only on accumulating for myself while forgetting the value of giving? I began to reevaluate my relationships with those around me. Before, I often let work and personal concerns overshadow my connections with friends and family. But now, without distractions from meaningless things, I spent more time nurturing and appreciating the important relationships in my life. Freedom is not just about letting go of unnecessary things. It's about freeing the mind from negative thoughts, fear, and the unrealistic expectations I once placed on myself. As the 30-day challenge came to an end, I looked back on my journey with a sense of gratitude. I realized that giving up everything didn't cause me to lose anything important. On the contrary, it helped me find the true values of life. I don't need much to be happy, just peace of mind, genuine relationships, and a simple but meaningful life. This journey taught me that happiness doesn't lie in what we own, but in how we live. It comes from being present in each moment, from the ability to let go of what's unnecessary to focus on what truly matters. I also realized that there's no right or wrong way to live simply. Everyone has their own journey, and the most important thing is to find a way of life that aligns with one's values. Now, I want to ask you one question. Are you willing to give up everything unnecessary to find freedom and happiness for yourself? This challenge is not for everyone, but if you feel trapped in a life full of pressure and chaos, maybe it's time for you to stop and reflect. What do I truly need? Start with small steps. Clean up your living space, spend less time on social media, or simply write down what matters most to you. You don't have to give up everything like I did, but by starting to let go of things that no longer serve your life, you will begin to feel the change. When you're ready, share your story. I'd love to know what you've learned from your own journey. And if you found this video helpful, please like, share with your friends, and subscribe to the channel to not miss out on the next inspiring stories. Thank you for joining me on this journey. A simple life may not be easy, but I believe it's worth trying.